Hello and welcome to this edition of the Fifth Estate video channel. My name is Matthew Thomas. I am a missile scientist, engineer turned social activist today. I deal largely with governance issues, justice and inequality. I have given 2 talks on a video channel, my video channel rather, the Fifth Estate channel, dealing with the technical aspects of UID. UID, as some of you may know, and for the benefit of those who do not know, is unique identity. In India, it goes by the brand name of Aadhaar. Aadhaar is a Indian word. Is an Indian word meaning basis or foundation. Unfortunately, UID has neither. It is neither founded on any science or engineering principles, nor has it any basis whatsoever or purpose. In fact, the Standing Committee of the Indian Parliament on Finance called it directionless and conceptually flawed. So today I shall deal with the deceits of UID, and I'll deal with part of those deceits. In fact, even before dealing with the deceits, I would like to state that the UIDAI has given the go-by to the rule of law. There is a strategy paper in the UIDAI website, and that paper talks of that UID will be created. Now, this was stated in 2010, April 2010. The paper was uploaded on the UIDAI's website, and it states the UIDAI. UIDAI stands for Unique Identification Authority of India. It says that the authority will be created. Please mark the words. It's futuristic, will be. And it was not created for 7 years. The statutory provision was non-existent. And here is an authority stating that it will be created by a separate statute but continues to function for 7 years. And even when it was created, or when it was attempted to be given statutory backing, that was done improperly. The government used a provision, the Article 110 of the Indian Constitution, which deals with money bills, to bring the UIDAI bill as a law. Unfortunately, the article defines very precisely what a money bill is, and the UIDAI bill certainly does not fall under the category. It was done to circumvent the need for discussion of the bill in the upper house of the Indian Parliament, the Rajya Sabha. So both the government as well as this authority being created under law have given the go-by to the rule of law. So that is even before the deceit start. So there was an attempt to thrust the program without a law, and when it was questioned, they thought it would be convenient to have a law, and when they found that the law may not get passed in Parliament, they passed it surreptitiously using a provision of the Indian Constitution which did not apply to that process. Now, the deceits of UID may be classified under 4 categories. The first is its pro-poor stance. It is not at all intended to benefit the poor, or as they claim, to prevent leakages of subsidies or welfare funds. In fact, the very fact that they use an euphemism, leakage, for what is actually forgery and theft itself proves its deceit. So the first category of the deceit would be the so-called pro-poor stance. The second category is whether the UID is an ID card or an ID number. There's a lot of confusion, and the confusion is deliberately allowed to continue. That is the second deceit. The third deceit is the repeated assurance by UIDAI that the data in the UID database is not shared. And the fourth is the strenuous attempt to hide the names, addresses of the vendors, and the contractual provisions of the contract with foreign service or technology providers. Now, in this video, I shall only deal with the first two, namely the so-called pro-poor stance, and the second one, whether the UID is a card or a number. Now, in the strategic paper which I referred to in 2010, the UIDAI made a statement. One may think it's an assumption. I believe it is an assertion. The state reads, in India, inability to prove identity is one of the biggest barriers preventing the poor from accessing benefits and subsidies. How and why the UIDAI came to this conclusion is not known and is left unsaid. There has been no investigation, no inquiry into whether it is so. In fact, all state governments have a ministry called the Ministry of Food and Civil Supplies, and there are people there called food inspectors whose duty is to go into the poorer areas where these people live, the slums and so on, identify them and issue them a ration card. Now, some years ago, or I think a couple of years ago, the Election Commission of India even gave a voter ID card to people sleeping on the sidewalks by identifying him with the lamppost number or the electric pole number near which he was either lying or sitting. So that is the extent to which the effort to identify people has gone by even statutory bodies like the Election Commission. So this so-called assertion that the lack of an identity is a barrier to access welfare benefits is a total lie and does not hold any water. Now, assuming that it is so, the lack of identity is so, and the UID sincerely believed it, let us look at what UIDAI did. They made an enrollment form. The UIDAI made an enrollment form in which they claimed that it is meant for all residents. If the UIDAI wanted the enrollment to be done for poor people in order to enable them to access benefits, why do you enroll all residents? And mind you, it's not just citizens, it is residents. Everyone knows that residents do not have welfare benefits. Residents have human rights, but only citizens can claim welfare benefits as a matter of right. So while they stay in the strategic paper, UIDAI envisions full enrollment of residents. They also, tongue-in-cheek, say, with a focus of enrolling India's poor. Now, in enrolling India's poor, they say, while saying that the poor do not have identity cards, the enrollment form itself asks for the poor to produce one of 18 other identity cards like passports, driving licenses, ration cards, voter IDs and so on. Here is an enrollment form. The enrollment form, the reverse of it lists out 18 identities which the poor may produce and 20 proof of addresses. Now what address can a poor person who either sleeps on, and millions of India are homeless, who sleeps out in the open near a village under a tree or in urban areas in a bus station or a railway platform or a sidewalk, what identity can such a poor person produce? And why have a form in which you ask them to produce? Interestingly, the UIDAI itself has admitted that the very large majority of people were in possession of an identity. If they knew that these people, as the enrollment went on, the large numbers had identities, why didn't they stop? If the purpose was to provide identities to those who did not have them. So that itself is a false statement. Next, we come to whether the UID is a number or a card. Now, this has got a very serious implication. UIDAI envisioned a situation where the biometrics would authenticate the person every time a transaction takes place, when the person has to be given a welfare benefit or subsidy. Now, they knew right in 2010 that this biometric authentication has severe problems and challenges and will not work. Yet there was a refusal to admit it and a pretension that it will provide unique identity. And that is the hoax being played. UIDAI has created an atmosphere where all people tend to think that this is some kind of a technology which will benefit the poor people, which will prevent corruption. Right from Supreme Court judges, Reserve Bank governors, ministers, political leaders, bureaucrats, even scientists who are not conversant with the challenges of biometrics, as I mentioned in my previous two talks, they all assume that this is some technology which has been either invented or being implemented by UIDAI, which is not at all true. And that is where whether UID is a card or number becomes very important. It was originally envisioned as a mere number, and as I mentioned, every time a transaction takes place, the authentication had to be done. The UIDAI database had to be queried to check whether the person who claim he is to be has the biometrics which is already in the database. Now, very interestingly, the UIDAI has given up this authentication in the LPG point of delivery. LPG standing for liquid petroleum gas. These are cooking gas cylinders in India, and largely the middle class use it. It was envisioned by the task force, of which the chairman of UIDAI was also the chairman of the task force on subsidies, and it suggested that when the cooking gas cylinder is delivered in homes, the person in whose name the cooking gas connection was should authenticate himself or herself using a scanner, and the database was to be queried. Now that has been given up, whereas the state governments, who have been fooled into thinking that biometrics works in all environments and for all purposes, are insisting on it for the poor people when they want to go to collect rations. Now the reason why this is being done is quite clear. Largely the consumers of cooking gas are middle class, and if authentication does not work, they'll raise a hue and cry and the hoax will get exposed. Whereas the poor people do not have a voice. He is told to come tomorrow, day after, and so on. And there's a study done by Mr. Nikhil in Rajasthan, along with his colleagues, Arna Roy and others, and they have seen huge number of people. People don't get their pensions for months together. NREGS wages are not paid for months together. They don't get rations. They're asked to come repeatedly to collect their rations because the authentication device does not work. So that is the reason why the UIDAI allows this confusion quite deceitfully to continue, whether it's a card or a number. In fact, UIDAI has even suggested on its website to people who have enrolled to use the acknowledgement form, laminate it and use it as a card. If you use it as a card, then the whole claim that this is unique because of its biometrics falls flat. So this is the second deceit. UIDAI is envisioned as a number, allowed or pretended to be used as a card, creating an aura of infallibility because biometric technology is being used. And even in the Supreme Court, the Advocate General waved a tablet in front of the judges who were asking if the use of UID, and mark these words, use. Use here refers to the assumption that biometrics is being used, whereas biometrics is not being used. What is being used is the number. The number in a database can be queried to know whether this person's bank account, and if it's linked to the bank account, you can send the money to the bank account. In fact, the UID number is not needed at all. If you know the bank account number and the branch, you can always transfer the money there. So the whole thing is a complete hoax. The use of biometrics is a pretension of use of technology to fool people into thinking some newfangled technology is being used in order to prevent corruption and siphoning out of welfare funds and subsidies. In the next talk, I will deal with the other two areas of deceit, namely the sharing of data and the hiding of the contractual clauses and the contract itself, as well as the vendors. Thank you. See you again.